Oh yes, thank you all for joining me live today. My name is Michael Smith. I am the National Consumer Education Manager of Janome Canada. So I'm very thrilled to be with you here on the Janome America Facebook page. Janome is one big family, so I always think of the Janome America team as my American cousins. So I'm thrilled to be here with you today. Normally, I'd be down at our Janome Sewing and Learning Center down at our head office in Oakville. But, although things are opening up here in Ontario, Canada, where I live, we're still not in the office. So I'm happy to be safe at home. Welcome to my sewing room. I don't know about you guys, but I have more than enough sewing projects to keep me busy. So I'm fine to be happy in, here at home. So today I'm going to talk to you all about AcuFil Quilting, or at least some of it, because it's a big topic and we'll try to get through as much as we can. So today I'm working on the fabulous MemoryCraft 15,000 quilt maker, but AcuFil Quilting is able to be done on a couple of different machines. Now, if you're maybe wondering what is this AcuFil Quilting, well, we can turn our embroidery machine into a long arm quilting machine. So this beautiful feathered wreath, for example, I'm not so good with my free motion feathers yet. I'm learning, but still I can do it more accurately and quickly in the hoop. Ruler quilting, again, it's a fabulous technique. Maybe I'm not so great with it, but this design with the feathered wreath has some straight lines that I could do with a ruler, but I could do it in the embroidery hoop too, maybe a little more accurately as I'm learning that ruler quilting technique. This cute little border as well was created with the AccuFill quilting software, so there's a lot you can do with it. Start small, a cute little placemat, no problem. As you learn the software, then you can get up to bigger projects. Now, as I mentioned, the AcuFill quilting software comes with the Horizon Link Suite CD that comes along with the MemoryCraft 15,000 quilt maker and its two previous editions. But, the MemoryCraft 12,000, for example, has an AcuFill Quilting Kit, as does the MemoryCraft 400E, 450E, 500E, 550E. All use this fabulous package. Oh, sorry, I know the glare. But yes, has the software and the special AcuFill quilting hoop in it all together. So the software will be on a disc that's included in this. So when am I going to be using AcuFill Quilting? Well, it allows us to, maybe I just want to quilt a block somewhere. So this is one of the designs built into the software, and I can tell the software what size of block I want, and it will size the design accordingly. Now this I'm just using our regular Iris polyester embroidery thread available from your Janome dealer. And it looks like it's a heavier thread simply because of this stitching going back and forth multiple times. So I can use any thread though. It really looks beautiful. Or how about this? It doesn't have to be quilting as a whole quilt. This would make a great dresser scarf, or maybe even a scarf for you. Table runner. This is no batting, no backing. This is just one piece of like a linen-like fabric. Now this would be a great time to use some water-soluble stabilizer underneath to support this as it's quilting away. And then you just immerse this in the water and get rid of your stabilizer that way. Now I love this Madeira stabilizer pack, and again, check with your Janome dealer. I know Janome Canada is a distributor of Madeira products, so I'm not sure about Janome America, but check with your Janome dealer. Maybe they carry this Madeira sampler pack, and it has many different kinds of water-soluble stabilizer included in it, so that's a really good tool to use. Now, this doesn't even have to be quilting like a quilt for your bed, for example, but this is quilting. How about make your own garments and tote bags? So this is a fleece fabric on one side, and again this flannel on the other, this plaid, and no batting in between. They are just two pieces of fabric laid together and quilted. This all started as yardage, maybe a yard and a half, 2 yards, whatever you need, and you quilt the yardage, then you cut it all apart as normal to make your garment pattern pieces. This was sewn together on the serger, very quick and very easy, so you could make quilted garments, quilted tote bags. Now, traditionally, again, AcuFil quilting, we think of bed quilts, or this could be a wall hanging or a great crib quilt. And a great starter project with this is buy a pre-printed panel, is what this started out to be. So the center of this pre-printed panel is all stitched with the stippling AcuFil quilting, and then you could either add on some borders, or maybe your pre-printed panel already has some borders to it. So why I recommend using that is, when you're first new to AcuFil quilting, you don't want to spend a lot of time piecing something intricate together. You just want to hurry up and get to the quilting part as you're learning that. So a lot of these pre-printed panels already have borders added to it, printed onto it, or you could just quickly add your own in this coordinating fabric. So here on this sample, it's got the AcuFil quilting in the center, and you could take that either border to border, or you could do edge to edge. But then also with these little blocks here, each of them is a different design, again, built into the software, and you just tell it how big you want that square to be, and your design will be sized accordingly. And then here on the border, then this has got a design that connects all together. So then you can do that as well with all the borders. So I'm just going to fold this up out of the way and show you some of the secrets behind AcuFil quilting. Now, this is the standard embroidery hoop that we're all used to. It's got an outer hoop and there's an inner hoop with a flexible grid. And then this is where the embroidery hoop attaches. But we're not going to be using an embroidery hoop like this at all. This is a very special hoop. This is the one included with the Memorycraft 15,000. And your one for your Memorycraft 12,000 would be the same. The one for your 450E, 550E, 500E would be slightly smaller, but this is the ASQ22 hoop, special AcuFil quilting hoop. Whenever I'm at my seminars, I do this, and I think, remember the lady from Romper Room? And you look out and you say, oh, hopefully I see Regina, and I see Anne, and I see Miriam. This special AcuFil quilting hoop, though, there is no inner hoop. There's just the big outer hoop with the magnetic strips. You've got your fabulous hard acrylic template, and that's going to allow you to use any thickness of batting, even 2 layers of batting if you want. Or again, no batting if you're going to do clothing. But then you would layer all your pieces over this hoop, and then you press this hard acrylic template down to compress that. Then you're going to use these really heavy-duty magnets. There's 8 of them that come included, and that's going to affix your fabric around your hoop. Now, the big secret to that, or one of the big secrets to this, of why it is such a great system and very efficient way to do your quilting, is when I connect this into my embroidery carriage of my machine, when I connect the hoop into my embroidery carriage, I don't need to unhoop at all. I can leave this attached to the carriage, and I simply just remove my magnets whenever I'm done in that one area. I remove my magnets, and then I can move my quilt over to the next section I want to quilt. I would then place in my template to then position my pattern, and then again affix my magnets. So then it's a really slick way to do your quilts. So I want to show you, so much to show you, and I'm going to try to be mindful of time. But I'm going to, if Joe can bring the camera over here with me, I'm going to show you on the computer how to get started. Now, it's really good, and come up as close as you need to. And it's really good, again, start off with a simple project, something basic. Now, when you want to talk about, though, more resources for learning, your manual, for example, now I have a version 2, Memorycraft 15,000 that I've updated to the Quilt Maker version, but in my manual, now you'll see I've got all these little yellow tabs because I use my manual a lot for information. So I've got one that says this is the page of my AcuFil quilting, and there in my manual I have page after page after page after page all about how to do AcuFil quilting. So you want to make sure that you use your manual. Now you can also go on to the Janome America YouTube channel. So log on to YouTube and then type in Janome America and then use the search box to then type in AcuFil Quilting. And even though it may not be the same machine as you have, the technique is the same. Now you can also go to our Janome Life blog, which is janomelife.wordpress.com. And there you will find, if you use the search box off to the right, there is a slew of posts all about AcuFil Quilting. I've written many, and in fact, I've been writing a series about the Horizon Link suite software, again, that comes included with the MemoryCraft 15,000. So today's Janome Life blog post actually was about Stitch Composer. So you can find out more information there. Now again, this Horizon Link Suite CD is what you would load into your computer, your desktop, or your laptop. If you have the kit for, again, the 12,000 or the 550E, for example, you'll just have a disk that says AccuFill Tools. You won't have these other components. Now, we're often asked, can I use this AccuFill software on a Mac? Really, the answer is no. It really has to be Windows. But if you have a Mac, maybe you can get a software program that will partition your hard drive. So then you're able to run Windows on your Mac. Although, you know, a number of the people, Mac users that come to us, they tell us they just get an inexpensive laptop. It doesn't have to be big and fancy like mine. It can be very small. They often get them reconditioned or even pick them up at a garage sale or something. It doesn't have to, you know, be anything fancy so long as you're able to load this software. And they use that inexpensive laptop just to run their various software programs. You know, the wonderful thing about Artistic Digitizer, that it runs on both Windows and Mac. So, you know, again, Janome is trying where they can to accommodate everybody. So if you're a Mac user, again, either partition your hard drive so it can run Windows or just get a, again, inexpensive laptop to run this software. So once I've run my disk, then I've downloaded all my Horizon Link suite or my AccuFill tool. So here is my software. The first thing I always recommend everyone to do, if you'll follow me over here to the right, is this little blue question mark that's up in the corner. And pretty much all of our Janome software has that little blue question mark. And you click it, and here are all these help files. You can go through each one of them. You can even print it out as well and create like a reference binder for yourself. But here is built-in help for all of your questions with AcuFill Quilting. And again, go check out your manual, check out Janome Life blog, check out YouTube videos. So the next thing I do, if you come back here to the left and go up to the very top, it looks like a page with a little plus sign menu. And I click on that, and there's a drop-down menu, and I go down here to Unit. And there's a little tape measure there, a little ruler. And I come over here, and it's got millimeters or inches. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm definitely a feet and inches kind of guy. So I was thrilled that I can change it to inches. So then I click OK, and now every time I use the program, it will default to inches. So that's good. So come back up here to the left, again, to the Applications menu, and scroll down to Design Collection. And I click on that, and then this is going to take me to all the designs that are built into AcuFill Quilting. So here's the AcuFill designs of all the different stippling. So the software, once you tell it the dimensions you want to quilt with your background all over fill of this stippling, it will choose the correct size of stippling for that quilt, for that dimension. So it's really amazing. Now, if I scroll through, we've got quilting designs. So I've got all these little parts and pieces that I could put together. For example, like this little leaf vine here that was created on that cafe border that I showed of that big quilt. Or this little flower, and then I've got this little corner, and then I've got this rope design. I put them all together and I can create this block. And again, I would tell the software, these are the dimensions of my block. and then I could bring each of these parts and pieces in and link, in the case of this rope, I could link it all together to look as if it would stitch in one piece, and then put the little flower in the center. So I can do that to create original designs. There's that other little flower that I showed first. These are the Leah Day designs that everybody loves. Now these stippling designs, I really love these. There are 24 of them, but really you get 3 designs in one. So that's actually 72 designs. So I'll go over here to this butterfly, and I love butterflies. So here I could use the butterfly as one design. I can use the butterfly and the stippling as another design, or I could use the butterfly, the stippling, and this border. So again, 3 designs in one. So on this quilt, I again told the software this is my size of block that I want, and I just selected the one butterfly. Now we've got the same editing capabilities in AcuFil Quilting that we do in our machines. So I was able to rotate this butterfly. Then I was able to use the 4 corner selection, and then I was able to instantly get these 4 corners, so perfectly, and then took it to my machine to stitch. I use variegated cotton thread in this case. So again, you could use any thread so long as it'll go through your needle. And then there you can see the back side that this is quilted all through 3 layers. So really cute and fun. This sample, which I showed before, shows the 2 different designs, the butterfly and the stippling in the background. For this butterfly, I use the, again, iris polyester quilting or embroidery thread, but then I switched out to a very fine 100-weight thread for the stippling, so you really just see the dimension and not so much trying to match the color of this panel. So that's a cool option. Or then again, I could use all 3. So I have my design in the center, I've got my stippling, and I've got my border. Now, if I had sized my block to fit up against this sashing, this border stitch out would have been my stitch in the ditch as well. So how cool is that? That's a big time saver as well. You're not doing it twice, or you're not trying to go back with a ruler and trying to stitch in the ditch that way. It's done automatically with the AcuFil Quilting. So that's very cool too. So our next category, our last category, is the stippling parts. And this is where you can, again, take all the various parts and pieces and either put them together, like this little wishbone could become a border or along a sashing, or I could just plop in maybe these pebbles around my embroidery, wherever I want to quilt. So in this may be a little hard to see because it's white quilting on white fabric, but around this embroidery then we could just tell the software, oh, I've got a 2-inch square here, and it will size this little flower as 2-inch, and you'll just plop in that flower, and then move over, oh, I've got room for a 4-inch square here, and then size your design to that 4-inch square and just plop it into place. So you can fill in all around your embroidery with these various stippling parts and some of the other designs. So there's a lot of versatility to the program. So I'm going to just get out of there. And then now, again, you can go through your manual, go through the help files to learn more about all these different categories. The ones I'm going to focus on today right now are the AcuFill multiple design layout. So that's as if I want to fill in my quilt either border to border or edge to edge with a stippling design. And then the other thing we're going to look at is the adjust last pattern size right on the last row, this one here. And now again, this is a great way to start learning the software, and then once you learn, then you can learn how to put all the different parts and pieces together. So when I click in for, I want to create the area in which my machine will quilt. So off camera, I went and measured my panel, but I'm going to put them into this dialog box that opens here, which happens to be 23.75 wide, and then this is 36.5 long. Now my measurements can go to 3.94 small, so just under 4 inches small, all the way up to 129 inches big. So that's more than, that's 10 feet. That's more than a king size quilt. So yes, you can quilt any size quilt with your AcuFil Quilting software. And in fact, I know several people that do entire queen size, king size quilts with this software. So after I enter in my measurements, I click OK. And then here, this grid represents the size of my quilt. Now, if you come up here, the only selections I'm really able to make are this blue arrow is a little bit more deep in color than the one next to it. And then this editing size, if I wanted to go back and refine my measurements, I could do that opening this box. Over here then to the right, you see these are all the same editing capabilities that are in your machines, but they're all grayed out now. I can't activate them. They're not active now. And that's one thing actually I really like about most Janome software. I think pretty much all of them have this. It's very similar to Artistic Digitizer in that only the selections that apply to what you're trying to do at the moment are active. It kind of grays out everything else that you don't want to use at the time. So that way the software is a little more user-friendly. It's not so intimidating. It's very intuitive. So here, pretty much the only selection I can make is next. So I click, and there, automatically, the software has calculated, based on the measurements I put in, this is how big my stippling pattern is going to be. And then this is going to be repeated over the whole length and width of my quilt. So I can go back up here to the applications menu at the left, and I'm going to scroll down to print and go over to print preview, because the cool thing is we can print out templates to put on that hard acrylic template so we know exactly where to place our patterns. So I can either toggle through 2 pages view at once. Right now it's just viewed to 1 page, which I prefer. And then I go up here and I click next page. So then I can see that I've got, and I'm going to use my zoom in button. On this page it shows me this is my stippling design and the dimensions of it. And then this layout here, if I go up to the top, it says number of patterns, width and height is 3 by 5. So each of these solid black lines is 1 pattern, which is represented of that square there. In the middle of that, of each of those, are these dashed lines, and that's the center of your hard acrylic template. So I know I've got 3 designs, 3 stippling designs wide by 5 stippling designs high. So that's a total of 15 hoopings in order to finish my quilting. Now that may sound like a lot, but it really isn't, and I'll show you in just a minute as we connect all the dots together. So then I would go up here to print out my templates and this layout sheet. Then I'm going to close that. Now I also want to go back up to the left here, again to that applications menu, so I can save my design. So I could either save it, or I like to go save as. So this allows me to save it where on my computer I would like it saved, and then also what I could rename it as. So you put type in this little arrow there. It's a drop-down menu, so I can save it wherever I want. I could put it on a disk, or I can save it to a library, whichever. I have mine saved. Here are my AcuFil Quilting categories. These folders were created automatically when I loaded the disk into my computer. So there's the AcuFill design and quilting design, stippling parts that I showed you earlier. And then down here, I've created some tests that I just named my pattern test. You can name it which way down here is what you'd rename it. And then you would click save. Now it's important to do that when you want to go back to use that last pattern adjustment that I'll show you a little bit more of that in just a minute. So now my pattern is all done and it's saved, and then now I'm ready to take it off the computer and get it to my sewing machine. So I go up here to write a design. So I click on that, and here I've got a drop-down menu where it says PC, and then I've got some choices. Sewing machine is one of them. Now, if I used the direct connect cable that comes with many of our machines, if we have a computer software in addition to our machines, then it comes with a long cable that will connect from the machine into the computer. But because I have a laptop and I really like to do a lot of my editing and designing away from the machine, and especially it's a beautiful day up here in Collingwood, so again, I'd like to be outside that I could be editing my AcuFil quilting designs there. So I will save it all to a USB and then I will transfer the design to the machine that way. It's just my preferred way of doing it. So I've named my little USB stick Darth Vader because I'm a big Star Wars fan. So as you see, when I select that, so that's the destination that my design is going to be saved, and automatically my two folders that are created when I plug in that USB stick into my machine, then it creates this embroidery folder, the EMB folder, or the ordinary sewing folder, the ORD. So I want to select embroidery. Now, this is all just personal preference on where you want to save your designs, but I will save them in the embroidery folder. And then I've created some subfolders. This Gemini and this downloads folder I've created, so I'm going to save it there. Now, you may have seen there was a little bit of spinning action as my machine was thinking, and you'll see all of these designs here that are already loaded onto that USB stick. It really is advisable to limit the designs that are on that USB stick. Great to have a USB that has all of your designs as a backup and save them onto your computer if you wish, but it's really helpful to have one USB dedicated to be like the vehicle that is going to go from one machine, your computer, to the sewing machine. And then once the design is at your sewing machine, you take back that USB flash drive into your computer and you delete that design. So that way your one USB stick that you transfer your designs with stays cleaner and more efficient. The more designs you have loaded onto your USB stick, the slower it will be. And your machine takes longer and longer to read all of those files. So it's helpful just to clean it up. Obviously, I need to do that. Get rid of some of those files that I've already used. So I need to rename my design, which I would click there and enter in whatever I wish. And then after I know it's going where I want it to go in the correct folder, then this icon here is my computer, and then there is my sewing machine and the USB drive and the little arrow in between. So I need to click that arrow, taking it from my computer to my sewing machine, or in this case, to the USB flash drive. So I would click on that and away it would go. Now I've already done that, so I'm not going to bother, but so I close that. Now, before I remove that USB stick from my computer, I want to go down here to the bottom right, and there's a little arrow along the taskbar that says Show Hidden Icons. And I'm going to hover over each of those icons until I find one that says Safely Remove Hardware and Eject Media. So I'm going to click on that, and then another dialog box comes up and it says Eject USB Media. And I do that now. It says I can safely remove that hardware and take out my USB. Now I do that because if you just pull that USB out of your computer, you can corrupt the files on that USB drive and the USB drive itself. So I have heard some horror stories where the USB driver is no longer read by the computer or the sewing machine at all. So all the information on it was lost. So again, safely remove it from your computer first. Now, before we go to the machine, I want to go back up here to the left and show you from the drop-down menu. I'll just go back to the start page, back to this adjust last pattern size. And this is a really cool function to have, because after you quilt all your layers together, depending on the density of your design and the thickness of batting that you use, that quilting will perhaps draw up your project, your fabric. So maybe by the time you get to that last square, your quilt is no longer the same size as the rest. So you can go back in. Once I clicked that selection, this box came up, and this is why we saved our design previous so I can go back to select it. And then once I select it, this other dialog box comes up where I can change the size of that. So it's a little smaller because again, after all my quilting, it is drawn up a little bit smaller. But this way, as soon as I hit OK, this whole pattern is going to shrink proportionally, though. I'm not just going to lop off one side. Certainly with this stippling, I can't do that. It would be so obvious. So this way, again, the computer software is going to do all the thinking and mathematics for me. So I'm going to click OK, and then again, that's all going to shrink in perfectly, proportionally. So now I could go back up, and I want to print another template, and then I also want to go back to write a design. Again, put in my USB back into my computer, send it that way, and then take it over to the machine to quilt that last square, and no one will be the wiser. So it's a really cool function to have. So now, yes, we can go back over to the machine, and I've got my little Darth Vader in hand. So I can plug it back into the USB of the machine, and I want to go to the folder here at the bottom to bring up my design. And I want to make sure my USB in this case was selected. It could be sewing machine wherever I happen to have saved that design, but it's, or one of two of USB. So there's the USB. So I know it's in my downloads folder, but over here, do you see it says 1 of 6? So at times when people save designs and they say, oh, I can't find my designs, maybe it's not in that downloads folder after all. Maybe it's saved to one of these pages. And again, the more designs you have on that USB stick, the more places it can kind of get lost. So another reason to clean up that USB stick and have fewer designs. So again, it could be maybe just search for the pages, or as well, this up arrow or this back arrow will take you back up another level. So if you can't find your designs by scrolling through those pages, hit that arrow and that takes you back up another level. So maybe I had saved my design to this screen by accident, or maybe I even saved it to my ordinary folder. So I could go back in and double check. So when people say again, I can't find my designs, but I know they're on my USB stick, search one of two ways, either scrolling through the pages or again, that up arrow is really good. So I know, again, it's in my downloads, so I'm going to go there and scroll through. So here is my stippling design. Now here, again, my machine says this is the Memorycraft 15,000. So I have the ASQ22 hoop that is selected. And then down here, 4 minutes is what it's going to take to stitch out this stippling. So if you remember from our template, these were our templates of our stippling, and then here is our layout. It said 15 hoopings, so 15 times 4 is 60 minutes, so that's really not that bad, an hour to stitch our whole quilt. So when I am in this screen on the machine, I like to go up here to the top, the little arrow and plus and minus sign. That's the adjust screen. And again, depending on what batting I choose, or you don't have to use batting at all, but depending on the thickness that you're quilting through, this is where you can adjust per project, basically, in the adjust screen. Then I can adjust my presser foot height of my embroidery foot, my P foot. So if I'm just using regular cotton batting or 2 pieces of fabric together, I would do 1.7 or maybe a little bit lower to bring my presser foot a little closer to my fabric. If I'm using a really lofty batting, some polyester, really fluffy batting, or maybe 2 layers of batting to do some kind of faux trapunto work, then I can use the 2.2 or increase that even more to give me more height to accommodate that extra loft. Now I can also go into my settings mode and make sure I'm in embroidery settings. Then I can adjust my presser foot height here kind of unilaterally for all my designs, and then I can go back and change it. Since I'm in the settings mode, one thing I want to make sure I've selected is the 1 stitch stop. Whenever it's in black, it's selected. So right now it's off. I want to turn it back on because I love 1 stitch stop. Means at the start of my embroidery design, it's going to take 1 stitch into the fabric, and then raise the needle, so that will bring up my bobbin thread. I can then hold on to those bobbin threads and start my design, and once I get away from the design, I can either trim off those threads, or I could knot and bury them. If I'm going to do, show quilt, or this is a heirloom or something, I'm going to use high contrast thread, and I don't want to see that extra buildup. So depending of which you choose to finish it off, and that way the back of the quilt is finished off beautifully. Now, speaking of bobbin, I want to use, I hope you can see, this little blue dot on my blue dot bobbin holder. Now, typically when we're embroidering, we're going to use the yellow dot bobbin holder, is the high tension bobbin holder, which when we're doing regular embroidery, we want to use to pull those needle threads to the underside, to the back side, because we don't want to see that bobbin thread creep up to the top. So that's when we would use the yellow dot bobbin holder. But I found when I started AcuFil Quilting, I've had my machine, about 5 years already. And when I started AcuFil Quilting, then by using that yellow dot bobbin holder, the needle threads, again, are pulled to the back side. So the back side of my quilt feels a little rougher than I would like. So by using the blue dot low tension bobbin holder, then that doesn't happen. The threads meet kind of in the middle of my layers in that batting, and it works out beautifully. So I recommend getting a blue dot bobbin holder when you want to do AcuFil quilting. I also use this for free motion quilting and ruler quilting, which is basically like free motion movements as well. And then when I use the hand look quilt stitches as well, because I want that bobbin thread to come up to the top to create the hand look quilting. So you can get your blue dot bobbin holder from your Janome Dealer. It doesn't come with any of the machines, so you can get this specially. Definitely a shout out to our dealers while I'm on it as well, that here in Ontario, we've started to open things up a little bit. So some of our dealers are actually allowing customers to come into the store, make an appointment, and come into the store so you can actually shop around and touch the fabric again. We've all been going through that withdrawal. So again, check with your Janome Dealer to see what kind of, again, maybe shopping by appointments they're offering, or again, many are still doing curbside pickups. Some are still doing delivery as well. So definitely give them a call, write them an email, and check them out too. So yeah, so after that's on my machine, I just need to create some space. So again, here are my templates that I have printed out. So here is my layout sheet, and here is my stippling template, which I'm going to cut out. Conveniently, there's an arrow to point the correct way. So I'm going to cut out my template. But I go even a step further in that on my layout sheet, to really get it more firmly in my mind that in this case it's 3 by 5, I take my highlighters and color in every other square so I can stay on track. So I know I'm going to start quilting in the center. I'm going to put my template down, and when I hoop my fabric, I'm going to put it down in the center, and then I'm going to go in either whatever direction you want. In this case, I'll go down to this yellow square to quilt that. When I'm done quilting that little yellow square, I'll go down to that pink square, and then when I'm ready to go in either direction, I'm going to come back to the center and then quilt that yellow square. Then I'll quilt that pink square and that yellow square. Then I'll come back to the center and quilt to the right. I'll come back to this pink square and quilt up, and then back to that square and go out and out. So you're always starting from the center out. So it helps you to keep on track. After a while doing that, you'll do this maybe once or twice, and after a while it's in your head and it's no problem. I rarely mark my quilts now when I do AcuFil quilting because I'm so in love with it and so used to it. Now on the gridded template, or the paper template that will go on the grid. So I cut it out along those dotted lines, but I go a step further and I cut it around my stippling so I can really get in when this template, and I've just attached it to the back of my template with a green painter's tape I use all the time in my sewing room. I love it because it's low tack. So I tape my paper template to the back of my hard acrylic template here, and then I can, again, I cut it around the edges so I can really see as I place my fabric, or place this on my fabric, where it lines up. So you can use any batting and backing that you want, but make sure you leave enough backing. This was a sample I had done, quilted it, it was all great. I thought, oh, I'll save time and I'll trim it off evenly, so then I'll be ready to bind it as soon as I'm done quilting. Well, then I quilted this whole center panel, no problem. I'm down in the borders, and then realized, oh wait, I still need fabric extra because I'm gonna attach this in my hoop. I still need something to hoop to. So I have added these, I call them sacrificial pieces of fabric. They're just basted on with my sewing machine. And again, I'll just rip these off as soon as I'm done all my quilting. So you can do that in a pinch, but if you can, think about it ahead of time. Add on at least another 4 to 5 inches all around the edges of your quilt like this, and then you'll just trim it off later. And certainly if you're like me, you will find many purposes for this extra batting and this extra backing, so they won't be wasted. So again, ahead of time, before doing all this, I would take my panel, my quilt, my quilt top, however big it is, and I would measure before I've layered it with my backing and batting. I would measure, again, how wide is it and how long is it. I've marked my center here just with these pins so I can see it. Now, I've used pencil to mark it because this is a teaching sample. I'm never going to finish it. You would use maybe a water-soluble marker, air-soluble if you're quick enough. You know, sometimes those disappear too quick. Whatever kind of favorite marking tool you want to use, just so long as, again, you know that it can easily wash out afterward. So I like to make those lines of center front, horizontal and vertical, which I would measure, and then those measurements are, again, what I entered into the software. But I also like leaving those lines on because it's going to help me line up my template. So as I have it taped up here, so I know there's my center lines. Well, there's the center line of my template, so I know it's going to fit right in there. Now, after I print my paper template, I know the dimension of my square, or of my rectangle. In this case, it isn't quite square, but I know the size of my paper template, so I can transfer the height and width of my template and the center mark of it onto my fabric. So I'm basically going to grid my fabric the way that that gridded placement was that we printed out. So if you can see here, because I know again, my template's going to go right in the middle. So I know this is the dimensions of where it's going to quilt. So I've marked that on my fabric. Again, before I do any quilting, I can just lay my paper template on it. So I know I've got, this is the dimensions it's going to finish. And then over here, I have it marked. Here is the center line. So when I go to quilt this section, for example, I know I'm going to lay my template right there in those crosshairs. Now, conveniently, I love it when it works out. Again, this is the dimension I told it to finish at this outer border, but this inner border line is my center line. So it's like, how great that really helps me line up my fabric. So if you want to follow me down to the table. Now, normally when I'm quilting with my AcuFil Quilting, I will tell you, I will always use my extension table because my table sits on top of, or my machine sits on top of my table. So I would always have my acrylic table that comes with the machine set up to support the hoop for AcuFil Quilting. I wasn't able to have it here. Again, I'm fighting for space. So normally that would be in place. But so I would have my hoop down on the table. I'm ready to line up this next square. I've started quilting again in the center. I went down one side, I went out to the left, and now I'm ready to go back to the center and go out to the right. So then I can lay in, and it just takes a little bit of fiddling. But then once you get this in, then you can see again the markings. This is why I drew so many markings on my quilt top, so then it really helps me get my placement, and I can just scoot it over however much I need. So once I get close, then I can really see, like right there. So I can see by, I don't know if you guys can, if you can get in close. But I can see by, again, through my gridded template that my design is going to just touch. It's just going to kiss that edge of that border. And I can just kind of fine tune it a little bit, tweak it a little bit. And then again, I want to make sure that the lines of my grid are going along these other lines that I drew. So I know my template is in exactly the correct position, or pretty close. I mean, at the end of the day, let's keep everything in perspective, especially what's going on in the world. If this is off slightly, it really doesn't matter. But it's pretty amazing how close you really can get this. So when I'm ready to clamp this into place, I like going a little bit from the outside in. So then that way I don't put too much pressure on this. I really don't want to make this tight like a drum. I still want it taut, but I don't want to make it too tight. And you can really tell once you're clamping this into place, if it is too tight, and if your straight line, for example, if it really starts going off wonky like that, then you know, wow, you've pulled it way too tight. So the nice thing is just take the magnet off and adjust your fabric, and then just kind of roll it in from the inward and then straight down too. People tell me, oh, these pop off. Well, you really need to give them a firm hit down. Once I clamp one side, I want to come in and clamp the side directly opposite it, so it keeps that tension more even. After I do like my sides, and I'll come up here to the top, and then I will clamp directly across from that. So that'll keep more even, consistent pressure. So once you have done that, take this off. And I say that because sometimes people don't. So yes, remove your hard acrylic template, and then you would take this to the machine with your embroidery carriage as always, and snap that into place the way you always do snap your hoops in, depending on which system you have. And then again, you will quilt this section. When this is done, your hoop will still stay attached to the embroidery carriage. You'll just remove your clamps, move your quilt over to the next position, wherever it happens to be. If it's going to be down on this square, for example, slide it forward, get your acrylic template back out, put it into place, reclamp, and away you go. So it really is a really quick, efficient way of doing your quilting. So have I covered, I know not quite everything, but everything I was meaning to today. I'm sorry I can't see notifications to answer your questions directly. I'm coming back next week to do some Facebook Live, so for sure I will have that corrected by then, because then Joe could read them to me. But again, I know everyone at Janome America is online too, so I know they'll be answering your questions again. So I hope you have joined me today. I hope you've enjoyed it. I've certainly enjoyed it very much. And again, I'll be coming back next week to do some Serger live presentations. So thank you very much for joining me. Enjoy your wonderful afternoon, and I will see you again soon. Bye.